evening, everybody. And whoops, am I muted?
Nope,
No,
you're
you're
good.
fine.
Okay, I thought I was muted. I'm sorry.
I was wondering
And
why
we
you
are
were.
going to start over.
All right.
Live show. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Good evening, gentlemen.
What's up?
Good evening.
Hey, we're coming off a weekend that we absolutely worked our tails off and a little exhausted. Probably should have rested a tad more before tonight. So if I get mush
Nah.
mouthed, I apologize in advance.
Nah, they know our saying. Words are hard, my friend.
Words are hard sometimes. But tonight, what we're going to talk about is a lady named Eleanor Cobham. And she was known as the Witch of Westminster. So tell me, gentlemen, do you know anything about this story?
This is one of those ones that I know zero about, actually. I know nothing about her.
About
I
that much.
love this. So I am bringing
Okay.
you something you know nothing about.
New.
No, but I love a
Oh.
good story about a witch. That's why I love hearing your life tell,
Mhm.
Shelley.
Love it. Story about a witch by a witch.
Oh, that's a bitch. I'm sorry, my bad.
Either way works. Hey, I take it as a compliment. Well, gentlemen, I guess that we will, since neither one of you really know much about this, I guess be prepared, get out a scorecard and a cheat sheet, because I'm going to do my best to keep, we're talking about the English aristocracy. So there's a
hold
lot
on.
of moving parts.
There's a quiz or something? Like, why
Now,
are we
there
taking
won't be a
notes?
quiz. I just want you to keep up.
I say, well, that's been
Alright.
Blake's wheelhouse. Like, I know Blake
It
is all
is.
about the aristocracy,
Okay.
so I'm going to be the one having a little bit of trouble. So I'm going to listen real intently.
All righty. Well, then here we go. Imagine England in the early 1400s. Stone castles rising against a gray sky, and the bustling courts filled with courtiers, whispering secrets behind heavy tapestries. In the halls of the castle of the king, power and allegiances shifted like shadows that were cast there. It was a world of courts and cloisters, whispers and wax effigies, and prophecy and fire. It was a dangerous and difficult landscape to maneuver for even the most senior members of the court, and each knew that they served at the pleasure of the king. And this is where a young girl named Eleanor Cobham's story begins, in a real life Game of Thrones scenario.
Oh, hell yeah.
So before we start, let me introduce you to the players in this game. First, we have Henry V, who at this time is the current King of England. John, the Duke of Bedford, the younger brother of Henry V and second in line to the throne. And then we have Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, the youngest brother of Henry V, and third in line to the throne. So these are the three brothers, and Henry V is the king.
Okay.
Now we move on to Jacqueline of Hainault. She is a guest in the royal court. And John IV, Duke of Brabant, is the second husband of Jacqueline of Hainault. So now we move on to Henry VI. Now, this picture of his is of him when he was older, but at the time he was the infant son of Henry V and the heir to the English throne. Lady Eleanor Cobham. She was a lady in waiting to Jacqueline of Hainault. And now we go to these three, which we don't have pictures for because I couldn't really find any pictures of them or even, portraits or anything like that.
They were supporting characters in Game of Thrones.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And every
they
one
are
of them lookers.
Roger Bolingbroke, who was a scholarly astrologer, Thomas Southwell, who was an astrologer and physician, and John Home, a member of the clergy. And then, of course, there's the infamous Marjorie Jordan, the Witch of Eye. So get your scorecards out, take some notes, because we're diving into the English aristocracy, where everyone has the same name and they swap spouses like they're at a swingers party, okay? So here we go.
Got some good times at swinger parties. Oh, sorry, we're live.
We're live. So Eleanor Cobham was born around 1400 in Surrey. She was the fourth child and youngest daughter of Eleanor Culpeper and Sir Reginald Cobham. He was a knight in service to the king. And the world into which she entered, it was brutal. The 100 Years' War loomed over England like a thundercloud, and disease stalked the cities. And not much is known of her upbringing, but since her family was part of the gentry, she most likely would have received an education, not only in the feminine arts of needlepoint and etiquette, but also taught to read and write. And Eleanor's family held status, but not prestige. And from an early age, Eleanor is said to have been precociously intelligent and devastatingly beautiful, with golden auburn hair and features that were refined and commanding. And now the family would have been considered an upper middle class in the British class system. And Eleanor would have known that when she got older, she would be most likely married to a knight, just like her mother had been and her grandmother before her. Or she would seek work as a lady in waiting for a noblewoman and find her husband that way. And finding a husband and having children was the primary goal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Eleanor was 22, her mother passed away. And as the youngest daughter, she was expected to stay home and care for her father or go and get a job. So she went to the work in the household of Jacqueline of Hainault. Now, Jacqueline of Hainault was a controversial character at court. She was twice married and in the process of divorcing her second husband.
Ooh, bitch.
She was a wealthy heiress of land and estates, and the estates were in what is now known as the Netherlands. And she was a rich and eligible bride as soon as she got rid of that husband. Now, this is why she went to England, because her seedy uncle had arranged a marriage between Jacqueline and his relative, John the Fourth, Duke of Brabant. And John, to put it mildly, was a loser. Lazy and rough-tongued, he was definitely not Jacqueline's Prince Charming. And her uncle had arranged the marriage with the sole intention of gaining control of her wealth. So Jacqueline fled England to escape, and she was granted safe passage to England under the protection of Henry V in 1421. And she became an honored guest at court. And once there, she began the process of having the marriage annulled. And Henry V welcomed her into the court and liked her so much that he bestowed upon her the great honor of naming her the godmother of the infant Prince Henry VI, the future King of England. And Eleanor was brought to court as one of her ladies in waiting. Now, this would have been a very low position as a lady in waiting for an indefinite guest because Jacqueline was not English. But Eleanor paid attention, and she learned the subtle weapons of court: flattery, observation, and timing. So in August of 1422, Henry V had been waging a war and tearing up France in revenge for the death of his brother Thomas. And in his travels, he suddenly fell ill and died without warning. He was only 35 years old and left behind his now widowed wife, Queen Catherine, and his only child, who was an infant, who was now the new King of England. Henry VI was barely 6 months old when he became the king. And the loyal subjects lifted their voices, calling out, "The king is dead. Long live the baby king." And when the throne passed to the child, England was now in the care of the Regency Council. Now, fortunately for the young monarch, his uncles, Uncle John and Uncle Humphrey, were in charge of running the country until the child was old enough to rule his kingdom. And John, Duke of Bedford, was a 33-year-old regent. And he was in charge of all the foreign relations. And he was in charge of the territories abroad and the war effort and the military, because he had a strategic mind. He was also the heir presumptive to the throne, meaning that if anything happened to baby Henry VI, John would become the new king. Now, 32-year-old Humphrey was named Lord Protector of the realm, and his job was to take care of the issues in England proper, the Regency Council, and entrusted with the protection of the baby king and the baby king's newly widowed mother. Additionally, Humphrey was third in line for succession to the throne. Now, Uncle Humphrey and Uncle John's jobs were first and foremost to protect the baby king. and govern the country on behalf of the sovereign until he was old enough to rule on his own. Oh, yeah, and one other task. They needed to get married and have children, just in case.
This already sounds like such
Right.
a fucking setup.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
It's a
Now
royal
these-
clusterfuck.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
Now, these men, they took their duty very seriously. And the following year, in 1423, John married 19-year-old Anne of Burgundy as part of an alliance against France. And Humphrey, he decided he'd marry Jacqueline of Hainault. Now, see, by now, Jacqueline had received an annulment, but it was a little bit complicated. You see, the annulment was only valid in England, not in all of Europe. And see, because at the time, there were two popes. The Western Schism had created a situation where England and Italy and Bohemia followed Pope Martin in Rome, while France, Spain, and Scotland followed anti-Pope Benedict XIII. And for her marriage to be recognized throughout Europe, she would need an annulment from both popes.
Oh, Jesus.
But undeterred, Humphrey married the 22-year-old Jacqueline of Hainault in secret in 1423. Now, most likely, he married her in a bid for claim to her territories in the Low Country. And when the news of the marriage got out, it was quite a scandal in England. The royal duke's wife was technically still married to someone else, and she was pregnant.
Uh-oh.
Dun, dun, dun.
But there was a slight amount of reprieve from the church when Jacqueline received a letter of denization. Now, this was a very big deal because it was legal proof that the marriage was recognized by England, and any children produced from that union would be legitimized and have official legal standing as noble children, despite their mother's other marriage. However, in order to protect her place, she would have to have her marriage recognized in all of Europe. So Jacqueline decided to join her husband in Gloucester while the royal lawyers sorted it all out. And Eleanor was brought along as a member of Jacqueline of Hainault's household. And sadly, it was around this time that Jacqueline had a miscarriage. Now, it was a superstitious time in medieval England, and the whispers began that God was unhappy with the union. Well, Humphrey and Jacqueline continued to travel around Europe, and Eleanor went too. And it was exciting for her. She had never traveled so far or seen such beautiful places. And it was during these travels that Humphrey took a keen liking to his wife's lady-in-waiting. And shortly thereafter, Eleanor and Humphrey began an affair. Now, as scandalous as it sounds, it wasn't uncommon. It was kind of one of the perks of being a duke. He was not only allowed to have a mistress, it was almost expected of him. And the beautiful and fun-loving, intelligent Eleanor had definitely captured his attention. And she was easily acceptable, being one of his wife's ladies-in-waiting. And to top it all off, she knew the value of discretion, and she was a loyal and trustworthy mistress. Now, Humphrey's relationship with his wife was complicated and more of a business contract. They were more or less using each other for political gain in Europe. But his relationship with Eleanor was fun and easy, and it was a relief from the stress of being Lord Protector of the realm. And over the next few years, the relationship between the lovers became an open secret at court.
My new title is going to be Loyal and Trustworthy Mistress.
Isn't that what we all aspire to be, right?
What were they known for in life? He was a loyal and trustworthy mistress.
There you go. Yep, there you go. Why do you think Satan keeps me around? I'm discreet.
Are you?
Are you though? Are you?
Maybe not. Not about him. Well, let me tell you this. Jacqueline was still wealthy, but her uncle, the one who married her off to the loser number 200 husband, the uncle was controlling her land, and Humphrey wanted it. So in October of 1424, Humphrey set out for Holland with an army to reclaim his wife's estate from her uncle. Perhaps he was trying to be a hero, like, don't worry, baby, I'm going to go get your shit back.
In those words exactly, too.
Yeah.
Don't worry, baby. I'm going to go get your shit back.
That's right.
Me and the
cocks his
repo crew.
Shotgun. Yeah.
That's right.
We going over to Holland.
That's right. We'll be back. But he took Jacqueline and her household with him, and that included Eleanor.
Mm.
And around this time, Jacqueline's second husband, the loser, died. But he died still claiming that he was married to her. Not because he loved her, but because he wanted the power. And now with loser John out of the picture permanently, Jacqueline and Humphrey should have been able to get their marriage officially recognized throughout Europe. But the French Pope Benedict XIII disagreed, and that is who they needed permission from.
Well, he's the anti-pope, though, right?
Anti-pope, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, he's over France and Spain and Scotland.
Well, if that's in Holland, how does he even have jurisdiction over Holland at that point?
But it has to be recognized throughout Europe.
Everybody
under English rule, they said, yeah, it's fine over here under Pope Martin. But under Pope Benedict, he's like, yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
So because he disagreed, then that's who they needed permission from in order to get it recognized throughout the entire European continent.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't do it. So no official recognition was granted, even though they'd already been married for about 5 years. And add to that, they'd not been blessed with any surviving children. So this was further confirmation to the Pope that God did not approve. Now, the war that Humphreys began in an effort to gain control of Jacqueline's estate, it wasn't going well. You see, he was not a military strategist like his brother John was. And really, it just wasn't any fun for him anymore. His attempt to recover his wife's land was a miserable failure. So in 1428, he just quit, went back to England, taking Eleanor and leaving his wife behind.
Oh, okay.
Now, that was the last time that Humphrey would ever see his wife.
Oh, sorry. He just basically said, well, shit, I couldn't get it, baby. Why don't you try to sort it out?
Yeah. I'm going to leave you on this unclaimed land. Have fun. Bye.
Baby, sorry I can't get your shit back. I'm going to shack up with the hottie. Okay.
Have fun with all the wooden shoes. I'll see you later.
Exactly. Well, Jacqueline's weary last soldiers lost the battle, and she lost her land and her wealth.
Man, I'd be pissed.
Oh, yeah.
Well, upon return to England, Humphrey promptly had his marriage to Jacqueline annulled on the basis that she'd been married all along. And just like that, he was single and free to marry again. Now, Eleanor and Humphrey's affair soon became public knowledge, and it was seen as a disgrace. The royal duke had abandoned his wife and taken up with his mistress? But Humphrey didn't care. He was happy. And in 1431, Humphrey married Eleanor. And now the marriage was controversial because marriages were made for political reasons that would benefit the crown, like land, allies, military, or wealth. And their marriage offered no such benefits. She was common hired help and was far below the status of the Duke and the third in line of succession to the throne. There was no reason for the Duke to marry someone of such low station, except love.
You loved her.
And this was a shocking concept back then. And by all accounts, they were in love. He treasured her, and he loved her, and she treasured him.
Shocking concept just back then. I mean, no, I'm just kidding.
Now, Eleanor was described as a woman beautiful in form, intelligent, and ambitious. And Humphrey was described as a pleasure-loving, cultured, intelligent, and popular. But he was also known to be reckless, impulsive, opinionated, and argumentative within the political community. But nevertheless, the two adored each other. And they enjoyed the arts and learning. And at their manor in Greenwich, they would entertain artists and philosophers and writers, and they were a power couple in society. They enjoyed their almost hedonistic mini court where fun was always afoot. It was a lavish and exciting lifestyle. Marrying the Duke of Gloucester and uncle to the king aligned Eleanor's fate with the highest echelons of society, and her standing had skyrocketed from the daughter of a knight to a lady in waiting to a royal duchess of England overnight, with the very real possibility of becoming a queen. But her marriage had mapped her into a dangerous game. Humphrey was a key figure, a prince with aspiration and political ambition, and a man with enemies. And there was still an issue looming large over the country. Henry VI was only about 12 years of age at this point, and he had no children. Second in line, John, Duke of Bedford, had no children, and the newly married Humphrey was childless as well. And England was one bad case of the flu away from having no legitimate heirs to run the country.
Especially at this time. Come on
Oh,
now.
yeah.
That's right. Now, John's wife, Anne of Burgundy, was home in France assisting with the trial of Joan of Arc. She was only 28 years old when she suddenly fell ill and died. And
Uh-oh.
John, fully aware that he was the heir presumptive to the throne, immediately took another wife, a teenager named Jacquetta of Luxembourg. Now, on this teenager thing, some say she was as young as 14, others say 19. 19. That's what we're going to go with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope she wasn't 14. But they say teenager, and a couple of the things I found said very young teenager.
We
So-
also know how history was back
Right.
Yes.
then. So we're just going to go
Yeah.
with 19 for our
Mhm.
podcast.
Yes. So Jacquetta, she was a noble woman and an appropriate wife for a duke and heir to the throne. But an heir to the throne from John was not to be. In September of 1435, John, Duke of Bedford, died, leaving no children.
Hmm.
And the death of John elevated Humphrey's standings to the new heir presumptive to the throne, should anything happen to Henry VI before he had children, and make Eleanor the queen. Humphrey was now the sole Lord Protector and was running England and would continue to do so until Henry VI was old enough to rule. Now, Humphrey had always taken the protection of the king very seriously, and he was the closest thing to a father figure in young Henry's life. Go ahead, Ryan.
Now, how old are we talking when they? You said he's 12 at this point. How old do
He's
they have
between
to
12
be?
and 13.
Okay, so how old do they have to be before they can take the throne and be like, okay, I'm
so
the king
I
now?
found a couple of places. Some of them said 16, some of them said 20.
Mhm.
We do know that Henry VI wasn't really at 20, still wasn't ruling.
Mhm.
I'll tell you why about that in a minute.
Okay.
But there's some have taken the throne as early as 16.
Okay.
So this was kind of based on the ability and passion that the child showed to want to do it.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I was just double checking it. It's actually younger for females. That's interesting.
Now, in 1435, Humphrey did something that boggled the minds of the Commonwealth. He's the heir apparent to the throne, remember? He placed his entire estate, all of his wealth and lands and titles, in a jointure with Eleanor,
Uh-oh.
meaning that she was able to enjoy all of his properties for the entirety of her life. And if she were to outlive Humphrey, she would inherit everything, making her one of the wealthiest women in England.
And the aristocracy loves that.
And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
eyes of the English Regency began to focus squarely on Eleanor. He just basically deeded everything he owned to this woman, and that was just not done. He's like, baby, if you outlive me, I got you, boo. And he put his money where his mouth was. So this was a big no-no, because some of the things he was giving away belonged to the crown. Humphrey didn't care. He was very reckless.
Baby, I couldn't get her shit back, but I give you everything I got.
Baby, I couldn't get hers back, but what I got is yours. Exactly.
I could just see this whole damn thing playing out in like a Florida trailer park somewhere.
Exactly.
Or something like that. God,
Mhm.
Jesus.
You get my lawnmowers and my weed eaters and everything.
That's because he loves her. Now, in April of 1436, 6 months later, Eleanor was given the title of Duchess of Gloucester. Gloucester. I can't keep screwing up that word. Sorry, my English people. I apologize. Of Gloucester. And now she had everything. She was at the height of her power, and she knew it. She embraced her new station with confidence. Some said a little too much confidence. She flaunted her wealth and rode through the streets in all of her finery, escorted by noblemen. She wore silks imported from Lombardy and gems that caught the candlelight like fire. She was an ever-present figure in the grand hall with flickering candles casting dancing shadows, and mounted with tapestries that she had commissioned with images of the goddess Fortuna. She was commanding yet elegant, and she had become influential at court, and some say a little too influential. And she did have some influence over young Henry VI. See, the young king liked Eleanor. She had many interests, and she was free-spirited and fun. But beneath this veneer, suspicions and rumors simmered, and courtly gossip whispered about Eleanor's influence over the king. And as the whispers continued, they said she was too ambitious, too haughty, too clever, and too dangerous.
Go figure, a woman who rises to power unexpectedly is all of a sudden too clever and too dangerous.
And the court of Henry VI was fracturing. The young king was pious and passive and indecisive. He showed no interest in politics and no signs of strength to be able to lead. He had no heirs, no allies, and no aptitude for ruling. And that created a vacuum. And Humphrey was the next in line. And it is believed that Eleanor hoped for a future as queen. I mean, who wouldn't? And she moved along among the elite with the dignity of a monarch in waiting. And she asked many questions, and she sought knowledge, which in itself is power. And one of her fascinations was with astrology. And this is where she makes her devastating mistake, because she had turned her thoughts to the possibility of inheriting the throne. She became obsessed with Humphrey one day becoming King of England, and by his side, her as Queen Eleanor. Now, astrology wasn't seen as unusual at this time. It was perfectly acceptable to practice astrology, and astrologers were considered extremely reliable. And many of the nobility would employ astrologers to advise them on various things like fortunate days for battle or predictions on the weather. But it was a very thin line to walk. And in 1440, she consulted with well-respected men, and I'm saying well-respected men, who worked in astrology to gain insight on whether or not her husband would ever become king. One of the men was Roger Bolingbroke, an Oxford-educated cleric and astrologer with a reputation for necromantic skills. And he was the principal of St. Andrew's Hall in Oxford.
That don't sound good.
No.
And the other was Thomas Southwell, Eleanor's personal physician and canon of St. Stephen's Chapel, and a practitioner of celestial arts. When the men came together and they produced the horoscopes. Oh no. The horoscopes they produced made a dangerous prediction. The prediction was that Henry VI would suffer a life-threatening illness the very next year in the summer of 1441. It didn't.
Sorry.
And it didn't take long for the prediction of the death of the king to spread throughout London, and it quickly reached the royal court and King Henry VI. Predicting illness and the potential death of a king was viewed as wishing or cursing the king to have such a fate befall him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was treason.
Yep.
And that is exactly how King Henry VI saw it. He believed that Eleanor was using sorcery and witchcraft to plot his death. Go ahead, Ryan. Were you going to say something?
I was gonna say she just picked the wrong people at the wrong fucking time and should have left well enough alone, and she would have been just fine if she had not had the necromancer and the fucking practicer of dark arts come together and produce a horoscope.
Well,
Just
he was
leave it alone.
Wasn't dark arts. I mean, it was.
Well,
I mean,
whatever arts,
necromancy
whatever it was.
is. Let me
Yeah.
just say, like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
put out the
Necromantic
necromancy, but,
skills.
like
Yeah.
necromantic skills, but the celestial arts. I mean,
Oh,
that's
okay,
just-
celestial arts. I thought she said dark arts.
It's
Okay.
just more about the study of celestial bodies
Right,
and
right.
stuff like back then. So
The
you
stars.
understand. Yeah, the stars. It's basically kind of how we see
Right.
astrologists at this point, which I don't think astrologists today, are evil or inherently evil or anything. But
And then
yeah, she's going about it like, I mean, she rose
And
to
then-
power. I think she decided she was like, I'm just going to take a bite out of this apple real big. I've rode this wave this far. Let me see what happens. And I think she bit off more than she could chew in that
Very
point.
possibly.
Woo.
and then Henry is over here like, Mommy, my aunt means to kill me.
His,
Leave it to Ryan to come up with a fucking voice.
now, this worried Henry VI, and he immediately commissioned another horoscope using his own astrologers.
Oh,
And the court
well.
astrologers assured Henry that in their readings, they saw no illness or death in his future. Long live the king, right?
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Could you imagine going back with that
Yeah.
horoscope? You're your own astrologer, like, here, sir, it still says you're gonna die.
Like he's drawing
Yeah.
his chart out, he elbows him. Draw a line that way.
Exactly. Now, this put Henry's mind somewhat at ease.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, that meant that either Henry's astrologers were lying or the other astrologers were actually plotting the death of the king.
Mm.
Now, this was more than idle curiosity. To ask whether the king would die was to imply a desire for the throne. Then to seek the answer from the stars via spells and spirits, that was known as treason by enchantment. And Henry had to have answers. At the end of June, Thomas Southwell and Roger Bolingbroke were rounded up for questioning, along with John Home, Eleanor's personal chaplain. And Roger Bolingbroke turned rat. He immediately confessed that he and Southwell had crafted rituals to foresee the king's death at Eleanor's command. She had commissioned the readings, so astrological charts were drawn and the rituals were performed. Some said the confession included the carving of wax figures in the likeness of King Henry VI, and dolls were pierced with pins and melted slowly over a fire that Marjorie Jourdamain had provided the materials for the spells.
They don't mention, though, he was probably tied to a torture rack while saying all this shit, though, either.
I found in two places that he might have been under duress in these confessions.
Oh,
he, might,
yeah.
he might have been under duress.
I only saw that in two places, so I gotta have three to confirm it.
I'm sorry, I like how Shelley just slides that in. He might have been under duress.
He
during
might
this
have been under duress.
situation. Dude, you know what? I hope that my file one day says that they committed treason.
Yeah, might have
by
been under
enchantment.
duress.
Might have been under duress. Committed treason by enchantment.
Yes. What a fantastic line. What are you accused of? Treason by enchantment.
Treason by enchantment. I might have been under duress when I spilled the beans.
Mhm.
But only
Yeah.
2 reporters reported that.
You know, and
That's right.
if you're in prison for that, too, you could scare the shit out of everyone and no
That's
one
right.
would
Ain't
bother
nobody gonna
you.
step to you.
Oh, for real.
Yeah. But yeah. Get the fuck back.
Get away. Now, after the confession, Thomas Southwell, John Home, and Roger Bolingbroke were accused of conspiring to bring about the king's death. And between July the 10th and July the 12th, the men were arrested and charged with treasonable necromancy and heretical practices.
Oh,
And
that's
Roger
not
the
fun.
Rat got an extra charge. He was also accused of contacting demons and evil spirits.
Okay,
Mm.
that's a little more fun. Man, how we go from treason by enchantment to treasonable? What'd you say? Treasonable necromancy and heretical
practices. Mhm.
That's boring.
That is my band name and the first album's name.
Okay. So Eleanor was told the fate of the men, and she knew that she would be arrested. And fearing for her safety, she fled to Westminster Abbey to claim sanctuary. But no holy walls could protect her from what came next, because there were charges of heresy. And if you don't know what heresy is a belief or opinion contrary to Orthodox religion or an Orthodox religious doctrine. It's usually in Christianity, or a belief that is profoundly at odds with what is generally accepted. So you basically have a different view. You know, you don't believe in heaven,
Mhm.
hell. You believe in Gaia and whoever the Kronos. I don't know. So sorry, I went back to the Greeks.
Sorry.
I mean, it's like you weren't going with the accepted thoughts at the time. How you
Mhm.
like me pulling out the two Greek gods? Okay.
I don't know why I found that so funny, but I did. Anyways, I'm sorry.
So when there were charges of heresy, it became the job of the church to decide innocence or guilt. And those who were accused of treason or witchcraft couldn't be given protection of the church. So Eleanor was denied sanctuary.
Hmm.
Now, on July 24th, 1441, Eleanor was questioned by a panel of bishops on 18 charges, and all were related to treasonable necromancy through acts of witchcraft and heresy. And she denied most of the charges, but she did admit to 5 of them. But which 5? We'll never know, because those details of the charges have not survived history.
Oh man.
Now, on August the 11th, she was sent to Leeds Castle to await her trial. And now, witchcraft wasn't necessarily considered a crime at the time. As long as no one was harmed, the courts would turn a blind eye. But acts considered harmful would be investigated. Now, Eleanor did confess to obtaining potions from a woman named Marjorie Jordanmain, who was known as the Witch of Eye. Marjorie was the wife of a cowherder, and she was well known to many nobles and courtiers. In fact, many members of the court knew her skills very well and utilized her services. Marjorie was even consulted by the second Duke of Somerset about his fate in an impending battle, and he sought advice on how to plan his strategy. And Eleanor had regularly consulted Marjorie for about 10 years, but she confessed that she had done it out of love. She wanted to give Humphrey a son and an heir, so she had sought a potion to help her become pregnant. She also confessed to tasking the Witch of Eye to make potions and drinks to entice the Duke to fall in love with her and marry her. Now, Marjorie had already been imprisoned for witchcraft in the past, but had been released in 1432 on good behavior, and she was made to promise to never practice witchcraft again. So Marjorie promised and promptly got back to business,
Doesn't say.
where
Yeah.
she continued to offer potions and charms and spells to those who sought
You
them.
know, it was some lord like, no, don't you ever do that again. Hey, could you meet me behind the barn? I need to get a potion to make her want to do it. Like,
Hey, can you give me another one of them love potions, Marjorie? See you, bitch.
like, you know, that's what it was. It was backdoor dealings like that. And then she
course.
just got caught.
She just goes, okay, no problem. Fingers crossed.
Mhm.
Well, out the door she goes.
I'll never do it again.
Mhm.
All right, step right up, step right up. Who want to fall in love? Come on over. Now, Eleanor was allowed to return to Westminster, even though she didn't have sanctuary. And when she returned, she asked that her trial take place in the church courts. Her request was granted, and the hearing was held on October the 2nd. and Eleanor was to be judged by a panel of various religious men, including the bishops of London, Lincoln, and Norwich. She denied most of the charges, including conspiring to bring about the king's death, but she did confess to acquiring the potions from Marjorie and for help in conceiving and producing an heir, as was her duty to the throne. And she explained that fertility and love were the reasons that she had sought out the services of the Witch of Eye.
So what is Uncle Humphrey doing at this point? Is he trying to intercede on her behalf? Is he
I'm getting to it.
okay? Because I'm like, where the fuck is he at?
Okay. Now, on October the 19th, Thomas Southwell and Roger Bolingbroke, the rat, were formally charged with sorcery and treason and felony with Eleanor as an accessory. 2 days later, on October the 23rd, 1442, there was a second hearing. Thomas, Roger, and Marjorie were all brought before the court to answer for their charges. And each turned on Eleanor and accused her of being the origin and director of all of the misdeeds. Well, the verdicts were rendered. Thomas Southwell was found guilty of treason, and he was immediately taken to the Tower of London. He died on October 26th, and it's speculated that he took a poison rather than die a traitor's death. Marjorie Jordan was found guilty of heresy and witchcraft, and October the 27th was burned at the stake in Smithfield.
Ooh, fuck.
Roger Bolingbroke was found guilty of treason, and on November 19th, he was hanged, drawn, and quartered.
Oh, shit.
Damn.
God.
John Home, Eleanor's chaplain, who was arrested with the others, was given a royal pardon by Henry VI for confessing to witnessing the witchcraft, and he was set free. And Eleanor Cobham, Duchess of Gloucester, wife of the heir to the throne, was found guilty of heresy and witchcraft. But the court didn't know quite what to do with her. They had never been faced with this situation, a member of the royal family convicted by the church for heresy and witchcraft. There was no precedent for dealing with a woman of her rank. So they improvised. And as punishment, Eleanor had to renounce all witchcraft and heresy. She was forced to divorce her husband Humphrey, which coincidentally nullified her claim to his lands, wealth, and titles that he had granted her, leaving her penniless. She was spared execution, but was forced to do public penance. The punishment suffered by Cersei in the series Game of Thrones is almost a mirror image of that suffered by Eleanor. On 3 separate market days, she was forced to walk through the streets as onlookers jeered, taunted, and shamed her. She was instructed to walk with a meek and demure countenance and reverence. She was barefoot, wearing a white robe. Her hair was uncovered, and her shoulders were bare. She carried a candle to the church to place on the high altar and repent. Each walk was a different path to a different church, but the same humiliation. And she walked not like a duchess, but like a criminal. And the court decided that as her final punishment, she would be condemned to a life of perpetual imprisonment. She was initially imprisoned at Chester Castle and allowed a few servants. She was also given an allowance of 100 marks a year to live on, which equates to 42,000 British pounds or $56,000 in today's money. Now, that's not bad for a prisoner. You gotta remember, she was a royal. And so this was quite, and this was quite a step down, and she was now imprisoned. Her life was spared, but the humiliation was devastating.
I would say that's the biggest part of it, is the humiliation of it for her.
Right.
Wow.
And in October of 1443, she was moved to Kenilworth Castle. In July of 1446, she was banished to the Isle of Man. and in March of 1449, she was moved again to Balmera's castle, where she died on July the 7th, 1452, cold, isolated, and forgotten. Now, as for Humphrey, he did make attempts to save her. Eleanor's trial and imprisonment destroyed all of his political influence, and he was losing favor at court, so there really wasn't much that he could do. Humphrey was noticeably upset with the loss of Eleanor. He pined for her, and he had fallen into a deep depression. He had lost favor with his nephew, the king, and there was nothing more to do but retire from public service. And 6 years after Eleanor's imprisonment, there was a plot to overthrow Humphrey as Duke of Gloucester. In February of 1447, Humphrey was arrested on charges of treason, most likely a made-up charge. And still, in the mires of his deep depression, he refused to move or speak for 3 days. February 23rd, 1447, he was found dead in his lodgings. His cause of death is thought to be a stroke, but there were rumors that he had indeed been murdered. Now, Eleanor Cobham left no children, no statues, and no legacy except for a few footnotes in dusty legal scrolls. But her story endures in whispers and in shadows. In an age where death came without warning, people believed that magic could bend fate. Church and state treated sorcery and spiritual corruption and political rebellion. These practices weren't just forbidden, they were feared. Eleanor dared consult the stars, something that many of us do daily, perhaps for guidance or maybe just for fun. But in the high-stakes game of politics, her influence was the true motivation behind the charges. But she was brought down by men who feared her more than any demon and labeled her the Witch of Westminster.
Wow.
Oh, man.
I love these kinds of stories because a woman unexpectedly who is beneath everybody unexpectedly rises to quote unquote beneath everybody unexpectedly rises to power, gains influence, all of these things in favor, and
She
does
must be a
one thing
witch.
wrong. She's got to be a witch because women
She
can't
must-
do that on their own. No, not at all.
And he certainly couldn't have really loved her. She must have bewitched him.
Yeah.
So, and
Which-
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I say Henry VI sounds like a little bastard too, so I don't know how his like reign ended up, because that's more in Blake's wheelhouse.
That's a story
but,
for another day.
yeah,
right.
but he sounds like he's like a little King Joffrey. Just,
Except not nearly as vicious, decisive, or strong.
no.
So I liken this to Game of Thrones purely for the fact that there is so much plotting and planning going on, and I left out a lot of the stuff about the Regent Council and how they noticed so many problems with Humphrey's marriage to Eleanor. They didn't like the fact it was basically Prince Charles marrying Princess Diana.
Yeah.
Had
just about to go to that analogy.
yeah,
Damn.
she had. She had a noble status, but she was not prestigious. So it was just considered a no-no. But again, Humphrey didn't care. He didn't care about 99% of the shit. He's like, hey, third line to the throne, I'll do what I want. I'm a spare. I can do whatever the hell I want to. And I thought it was, I don't like the fact that I think she was made to confess that
Oh, of course.
she had used potions to bewitch Humphrey, because they just couldn't believe that she really loved him and he really loved her. I think this is a very tragic love story. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think you're right. I think this is all for, it was someone whose political status was threatened by a woman again, and they didn't like it, so they just did what they could to get rid of her. Obviously because she was showing the initiative, like you said, she was in court asking questions and carrying herself
She was
as if
trying
she
to
was
learn so that she
Right.
could be a good wife to her husband
right.
and follow the standards that were being set.
Mhm.
She wanted, because she didn't come from that world.
Right.
She was learning everything she could. Okay, that lady
Mhm.
sat like this, or they held their hands like this, or she was trying to learn everything she could, and that I'm sure
Right.
got a few haughty looks from some of the like,
Right. And
you
she
know,
seemed to be more interested in being a leader than not George,
Henry.
Henry the Sixth. Henry the Sixth is like, Mommy, I want to be an artist. But she's like, I, I'm learning these political alliances. I'm learning,
Hmm.
how things are working. And he did not like that. And any trumped up charge they could find to get rid of her, I think was
Well, and
going to
that was the
happen.
thing too. She was Henry the Sixth actually really liked Eleanor, and this was. I mean, she
At
would keep
first.
court. No, actually, he really did like her. He actually, at one
Hmm.
point, considered pardoning her,
Hmm.
because he just liked her that much. And but the superstitions were so rampant,
Hmm.
and what she'd been accused of appeared to be so flagrant that it was another one of these things where he couldn't just let her go.
Hmm.
So I it was hard for him, and again I left out a lot because he went back and forth in his own head. Could she really do this? Was this really something? And it said that the king actually toiled and troubled his mind as to
Right.
whether or not the charge, if she had really consulted someone to ask about his death.
Well, and two, I mean, that's probably why her sentence wasn't as harsh as anybody else's. Like you said, I know the church
Well,
had
they didn't
never
know what to do with
convicted a
her.
noble, but I'm sure maybe he did intervene, and we just don't know about it because something didn't survive through history. Maybe that's why she was able to live and be moved around to these castles. But
The
what?
king and the church, Henry VIII ran into a lot of problems with the church. They were kind of separate deals.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't think that he would have had, especially he was not strong like Henry VIII. He was
Hmm.
a very indecisive king. So I
Hmm.
don't think he had any influence over what these, bishops decided to do with her. I think the bishops
Hmm.
didn't know how to feel about condemning, you know,
Aristocracy, yeah, royalty.
aristocracy.
Hmm.
Perhaps if something happened to Henry VI tomorrow, suddenly Humphrey is the king.
Hmm.
Were they going to be ballsy enough to condemn the actual queen at the moment to death?
Hmm.
Mm,
So, I mean, when it came to her, I know you said he anguished over it. Now, Humphrey was like a father figure to him. Like, did
yes.
he was so, and their relationship you said was strained. How much more did he anguish over Humphrey? Like, did he have a
I
lot
never
going on with
really
that? Did you ever
saw a
see?
lot about that, except that
Hmm.
because Humphrey had really taken the role of father figure in his life, because he was the
Hmm.
one that was home.
Right.
Brother John of Bedford, is Uncle John of Bedford is off, doing all the military stuff, waging wars,
Hmm.
and fighting the good fight for England. But Humphrey was there
Hmm.
and hanging out with young Henry VI, and he really did take on the role of father figure. It's also alleged that Humphrey may have had two children.
Hmm.
Whether they're with Eleanor Cobham or not is not known, because he never legitimized them. And a lot of the, English scholars think that he did not legitimize them because he wanted nothing to impede the rightful succession to the throne, and that would
Hmm.
include any of his children. Now you got to remember, once they were legitimized too, if something happened to Henry VI and he had legitimate children, they could off his ass too.
Hmm.
So he made sure that there was no one behind him in line of succession. So it was either Henry VI gets married and have kids, or it's him. So that is nothing more than speculation and rumors. There is no proven fact, but it is thought that he had two children, but he never legitimized
Huh.
them. So
Interesting.
This is all in a time period, obviously, prior to witch trials, and I'm not talking about the ones we had over here in
it
America.
is
The ones
prior
that
to
we, the
Mhm.
ones that we had in America were nothing compared to the ones that happened in Europe. I mean, yes,
Mhm.
it was a very tragic moment in our history, but the ones that were happening in Europe in the 15 and 1600s were astronomical compared to what we had over here. Where we had 19, they had hundreds upon
and this
hundreds of
is
people
really
die.
before all the witch trials really start amping up.
Yeah, but we're talking about mid to late 1400s. Your witch trials start coming into the picture in the 1500s, so you
Right.
know that the atmosphere is there for this. So that is going to, Ryan, answer your question about maybe about how much it played into it. that's going to play a lot into it, because you have this growing sense of the devil is real and the devil is always out to get you, and you got to look up behind your back, So what we saw over here in America, they're about to see at this time in Europe. So I think that's why there's this big hoopla about the consulting the stars, everything, and why it's seen as witchcraft and treason to the king. To me, this story actually resembles more King Henry VIII and Wallis Simpson, in my opinion, and their love story. But he actually denounced the throne for her.
Who?
She was in Wallis Simpson and Edward VIII.
Edward VIII. I was going, wait a minute, not Henry VIII.
Sorry.
We've
been talking about Henry this whole episode.
Yeah. Okay.
We've been talking about Henry this whole episode.
I just want to make sure that was correct.
Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson.
Right.
Reminds me of their story, more or less. Granted, there was, he renounced the throne for her, but in this case, he didn't. But it was all about love. But yeah, the whole, the monarchy, British monarchy, has always seemed to have a problem with those, more or less, women, usually, who were brought up, quote unquote, in their station in life.
Not of a divine bloodline.
Exactly. That's where I was about to go with that. And you also got to think, when it comes to punishing her, even more so back then than it is currently, you were anointed to rule at that point. You were royal blood. It was designed by God. And so whenever the punishment phase comes to, what the fuck do we do with this lady? We've never had this before. Yeah, they're in a real conundrum, because she is at this point of royal status. I guess,
but not the
holy
bloodline.
Not divine blood. Yeah. That's right.
Right. And so, but you see the kind of conundrum there, because it's like, yeah, she's not divine blood. She is royal, but she's not born into it. So what do we do? Yeah, I don't think it's so much later whenever they're like, fuck that shit, off with their head.
That's Henry VIII. That's Henry VIII. Yeah.
No. So we got to wait a few, 100 years before that happens? Maybe 150 years?
Yeah.
And about 200 years. Yeah. Somewhere in there.
Because Henry VII's got to take back over, have all of his kids. Henry VI's got to get married, have his kid. It's Henry VII, and they got to lose the throne. Then Henry VII's got to regain it, and Henry VIII's got to, We got about 100 years.
This goes back to the old thinking of back then, that women aren't supposed to be able to climb that high, or to be able to hold powerful positions, stuff.
How in the world could they ever be smart enough?
Let me finish. On their own right. I didn't interrupt you.
Sorry.
You two had y'all's argument time. Let me go.
Okay. My apologies.
Anyways, you're back in a time when it's like women couldn't, quote unquote, women can't do this on their own. How can a woman be this powerful, this smart, this clever? She's a witch. She's been consorting with the devil and consorting with the stars and all that stuff. There has to be witchcraft involved, which I think is fucking bullshit. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. But anyways, I think a woman has every capability, I don't care what time frame she's from, to be able to climb as high and work as hard as a man can. Prove me wrong. Anyways, put my money where my mouth is on that. I'm not going to go too far into that. I'll get into a bitch session. But so I think that's all this came down to, was that I think that there was a very sticky situation happening, that they were learning, hey, wait, he didn't have any children. King Henry VI, he's not old enough yet. This looks real questionable. And then I think it just was found out. Oh, she consorted with the stars. She's a witch. We got to get rid of her. Which, in that case, and in that time, if she falls, he's obviously going to fall. Doesn't matter the connection, the status, or anything like that at the time. If somebody's caught and you're married to them, and they're, treason, heresy, witchcraft, any of those major ones back then, the spouse is also going to fall. So I don't know. I think there might have been a plot or conspiracy behind the quote unquote plot and conspiracy, if you will. That's what it sounds like to me, because it was very cutthroat Game of Thrones back then.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
I mean, to each their own on that. So, I think she was a very clever, smart woman, and she should have been able to hold her rank. And goddamn it, I consult the cards and spirit every freaking day. So
he's a witch. Get him.
I'm a witch. Hang me, quarter me, and draw me.
No,
like
no,
one
that
of your,
was
like one,
that was a horrible punishment.
Like one of your French girls wearing this, wearing only this.
Yes.
Ew.
Burn me like one of your
that
French
visual
girls.
before I go to bed.
all I have is my Tree of Life necklace on, for those of you who are only listening to the audio. Shelley can draw me like one of her French girls. It's all right. Wow.
Frenchman.
No, I want you to give me some perky bosoms.
Okay, I can do that.
That's
gentlemen,
my thoughts on that.
So this is a story that you knew nothing about, and so I definitely want your final thoughts on Eleanor Cobham, the Witch of Westminster. Villain, victim, pawn.
Victim and possible rightful heir to the throne.
Oh damn, we going rightful heir to the throne.
Possibly.
Oh.
How do you get there?
Yeah, I'm not sure how you get there, but
well, I'm saying, I mean, if she had not died, not her being rightful heir, I'm sorry. Well, no, yeah, I guess what if hold on. If they had kids, they would have ascended the throne, or King would have had to die.
Okay, so your line of succession.
6 had to die.
Right.
This is how your line of succession works, basically.
Okay.
You have king or queen up top, right? That king or queen is, and this is going to be back in that time, not currently, not modern.
Right, because I know it's different.
Right, that king or queen would have had children. Whoever was the oldest son, that was heir to the throne. And then every son after that comes second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever. Now, if first son has one child that is a son, let's say their firstborn is a son, every sibling to that first child now moves down in the line of succession, because now their child is now second in line for the throne.
That's the direct bloodline.
And then all their aunts and uncles now become third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth down in line. So, and then if that kid spits out another kid, guess what? Then that
you get moved down.
Great grandchild becomes third, fourth in line, and then all the great aunts and uncles get moved down.
Okay.
Yeah. So Henry the Fifth, there were 4 brothers in that, and Thomas was killed, and Henry the Fifth was the oldest, right? And then he's got John and Humphrey. Those are the 2 remaining brothers. One child. That child's the heir. But if anything happens to that child and happens to the 5th,
then the uncle becomes
John, the eldest uncle. And if the eldest uncle dies with no children, then Humphrey, the youngest brother, now becomes.
Right.
Got it. Okay, that's why I was confused on the line of succession. Okay,
but anytime there's a child, brothers and sisters of the king are moved back.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, what I will say is she was a victim. I don't think that she wasn't doing anything that anybody else wasn't doing. And the nobles were all consorting at that time. They were all doing it. And as evident with the trial, because the woman who was the witch said that she had, she had consulted with all these nobles. So I think that she was a victim. She just happened to get that chart read, wrong place, wrong time. And they used it to strip her of everything she ever had. So I think she's a victim. What about you, Blake?
Straight up victim of the patriarchy. That's what I'm going with.
All right.
No, I'm a straight up victim. I already said my piece on it. I think she was just taken advantage of and just needed to be. I think they saw that she needed to be knocked down a couple of pegs in their opinion. I think. I think they saw her getting too close in her mind to the throne.
Right.
They were like, "Whoa, wait a minute, you're crossing the line. Oh, she consorted with witches. She's a witch." So.
And I think that she was a pawn and a victim, because I think that her fate became sealed the second that Humphrey basically gave her all of his land, his wealth, and his titles upon his, and said that whenever I go, it's yours. The royal regency could not have that. That could not ever be an option for any royal going forward. And the fact that Roger the Rat, Bolingbroke, just makes this confession. I'm not even sure that I believe that she ever actually went to see him. Because if he was forced to confess under duress, and there's, like, again, a couple places says he might have been under a little duress, that I think that whoever was his duresser probably told him what he needed to say in order to get the torture to stop. So I'm not sure she even dabbled with astrology, because she never admits to that. She admits to going for potions to become pregnant, to produce an heir, to be a good wife to her husband and produce an heir to the throne, which was her duty as a royal female. She never confesses to going to see an astrologer. Everything is speculative that is what she wanted, was to become the queen.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Good
think
point.
this. I think that Humphrey, whenever he made her as powerful as him in the wealth department, I think she became a pawn, and there was a target on her back, and the regents decided that she had to go.
It's a good point.
And
Mm-hmm.
and with that, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
Sounds good. Well, if you do want to support the show directly, check out our Patreon page that is going to be linked in our Linktree link on our Facebook and X profiles tomorrow morning, which is Wednesday morning. With $5 a month, you will instantly unlock over 450 exclusive videos, including the pre and post broadcast show, or pre and post broadcast shows.
We're all
There we
mesh
go.
mouth tonight. Yeah.
I know, which is the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast, where we give you just a little bit more of detail. We've been recently talking about our clean out of the Old Park Hotel with Chad and Leslie Wandell and the Paravengers and Ghost Geeks and all of them. We're going to be continuing that in our post broadcast. So it also, sorry, your support keeps. Oh my God, let me try
to
this
all
again.
of us. Let's try
Your
this.
support helps us keep bringing you these ghostly adventures and these stories week after week. So if you're not sure about joining Patreon, try it risk-free with our 7-day free trial. Make sure you stay connected with us. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and many more by searching Everything Vaguely Paranormal and looking for the green sound wave, or by clicking those icons in our Linktree link. Remember, you can also catch us live every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube if you'd love to see our beautiful faces. If you would like to meet us in person, you've got a few choices. First up, we will be at the Paranormal Rockdown at Broadhead Manor in Broadhead, Wisconsin on July 18th and the 19th. Then we are going to swing over to the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash from July 25th through the 27th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Then we're off to the center of the country for KC Paracon on August 2nd in Kansas City. Then we are going up to Vernal, Utah for Phenomicon 2025, September the 3rd through the 6th. A lot of big names are going to be at that one. Then we will be back in the middle of the country for Epic Events LLC's Paranormal. What are they doing? The match game? Isn't that what it is? An investigation?
It's a Paracon and investigation. And I believe that Blake is going to be hosting match game, and I'm going to be one of the panelists. Yeah, Brian's going to be a panelist too. So that is our friends, the Mysterious Sam and Mike with Epic VIP Events LLC. And this is their first year doing it, and we are happy to participate. Yep,
and they're going to be selling tickets for that. So we will make sure to share that information as well. But you can always check out their Facebook, Epic Events VIP. Sorry, I'm going to butcher their name. Sam and Mike's Facebook page, Epic Events VIP LLC, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's right. That's going to take place on September. I always get the acronyms wrong. That's going to take place on September the 27th as well. So, and finally, we will be attending the Rock Island Roadhouse Esoteric. I give up. The Rock Island Roadhouse Esoteric Expo on October 4th in Rock Island, Illinois.
There we go.
Make sure you subscribe to our Eventbrite page to be notified when public investigation tickets go on sale. Yes, we will be putting up another one, so be ready for that. We will be letting you know right now that it is going to be for Old Park Hotel. So it is going to be in October. We will have tickets to post soon. So make sure you subscribe to our Eventbrite page. It will be a 2-nighter event, as it always is, and you will be able to investigate every single room in that location as they have since been fully cleaned out.
Including the owner's suite.
Yep. Well, we are grateful for your continued support. Every like, comment, share, and download keeps these adventures alive. So if you have a favorite episode, share it with your friends and make sure you tag us. Or if you have a story, comment, or question, or you would like to have us as guests on your show, we're not sure why. Email us at the evppod@gmail.com. That's EVP. THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Please, God, go like, share, and subscribe. Please hit that like button on the YouTube. Just for Blake making it through. Give him the thumbs up.
Get us off the screen.
So we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Thank you for being here. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.